Following the Robertson panel, it seemed that the FBI, the CIA, and even the NSA, the National Security Agency, took an avid interest in UFOs. This interest was heightened during periods of political unrest, like the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Why? Did these federal agencies all believe that UFOs could be used to destabilize the balance of world power? Were they aware of something more significant with regards to the phenomenon? Unfortunately, documents released to the public do not give us much of a clue. We do know that some of the sightings classified as unidentified objects by Project Blue Book, the team set up to investigate UFOs between 1952 and 1969, were actually CIA spy planes. Did their desire to hide the existence of these spy planes from the American public justify their interest in UFOs? One thing is clear from the thousands of pages of released documents. The primary motivation of information agencies was not to undertake any serious research into the true nature of these UFOs.
Well, many people say that the federal government, the American CIA and the NSA and whatever intelligence organizations there are, and in Canada as well, that these various organizations are really overtly display no interest whatsoever in the subject, but in fact have sort of a secret concern with it and are interested in the subject, and that might very well be true. We have almost no evidence of this, however, and it's might be just sort of a triumph of hope over fact, but my guess is that they really don't care much about the subject at all. I think that the Canadian government and the American government gets its cues essentially in a subject like this from the scientific community, and the scientific community is resolutely hostile to the subject. And it's gotten worse with the scientific community. There's very little wiggle room, as they say. And so in my own research on the subject, I have found no serious evidence of any kind of major studies going on for any country, at least in North America.
In the United States, there was another agency that was often associated with UFOs, NASA. According to some authors, every spaceflight was accompanied by extraterrestrial vehicles. Obviously, NASA has been tight-lipped about these incidents. One such incident was filmed during the Space Shuttle Discovery's mission STS-48 in September 1991. The film was analyzed by University of Nebraska physics professor Jack Kasher.
The Space Shuttle Discovery was flying near Australia at the time, and they had the television cameras on, and it was looking out at the night sky because nothing interesting was going on. And suddenly there appeared a bright light on the right-hand side. There were a number of bright lights that were significant, but this was the most important. And it had started drifting slowly to the left, and it got to a certain point. Suddenly there were two quick flashes on the lower left-hand part of the screen, and apparently in reaction to that, the object shot back up very sharply to the right, and shortly after that, two streaks went through the picture. One right where it had been, or very close to that, and another over here. There was also a second object that had been drifting up. It reacted by moving off also, and there were some over on the right, and they reacted as well. So you had several objects, a double flash, reaction, and then streaks going into where the objects had been. The NASA answer is a reasonable one because it does happen. They said that they were ice particles that were close to the shuttle, and there are ice particles close to the shuttle frequently. And they said that the attitude adjuster rockets went off, and the exhaust from those rockets then blew those ice particles away, and that's what happened. That can happen. And to someone just casually looking at the video, if that's all you do, then it probably seems like a reasonable explanation. I went far beyond that, though, because I took the video and I took the position locations as functions of time, and I made graphs, and I made a very careful scientific study of how the objects reacted and how they moved, in how the flashes would interact with that. And basically, bottom line, I developed what I consider 5 fairly significant and strong proofs that the objects could not have been ice particles.
The film produced during mission STS-48 is not the only one of its kind in NASA archives. Countless numbers of strange objects have been filmed from the time of the Mercury program in the early 1960s to recent shuttle flights. In July 1969, the day before the first astronauts landed on the moon, the crew of Apollo 11 filmed two odd lights, which were later rationalized as reflections off the windows of the Lunar Excursion Module.
I can't say for sure that they were hiding information in this case. I do suspect that NASA has been involved with UFOs, and it really would seem reasonable to me that if they are involved with UFOs, that they would tend to cover it up. UFOs are very interesting objects, and it's not really a matter of whether the government is covering up UFO information. They are. It's a matter of court record that the government has documents that deal with UFOs, and they are classified. So there are those documents that exist, and so quite possibly NASA has some too. I cannot say for sure that they are specifically involved in the STS-48 as a cover-up, but I do have confidence in my study, and I think that I can establish fairly well that these were actually spacecraft of some kind, not ice particles.
I've spoken to many astronauts. The majority of them, I believe, have not in fact seen UFOs, and they become distressed when a lot of reports have been attributed to them. But there certainly have been a number of unexplained reports. For example, James McDivitt told me that he was puzzled by an object that he saw in one of the Gemini flights. And I've had letters from other astronauts saying they've been puzzled by certain things, some of which have been explained. I think all the so-called smoking gun, I don't know if you're familiar with the smoking gun, the shuttle footage, I'm totally unconvinced. I think that nearly all those pictures show ice crystals being blown away by the directional thrusters on the shuttle. That's my own opinion, so I think that's all nonsense about those things. If the idea that NASA would release all this stuff openly every day to the public is ridiculous if they were actual UFOs. They don't look like UFOs, they don't behave like UFOs, and they're not UFOs in my opinion. NASA has released a number of documents which, in fact, I've published in Beyond Top Secret, which is the revised and updated edition of Above Top Secret, and I've published quite a lot of information also in Above Top Secret, my first book, which is now out of print. And quite clearly that indicates a serious involvement on the part of NASA. NASA itself classifies a lot of information at confidential, secret, top secret, and above top secret. We know that. I know that from their physical security handbook. And I'm quite sure that a lot of material by NASA is being withheld.
In Canada, the UFO matter was never really assigned to civil authorities as it was in the States. The only significant episode dates back to the early 1950s. Wilbert Smith, an engineer working for the Federal Department of Transport, undertook an initiative of his own, with the support of his superiors, to study all of the UFO reports collected by the Department of National Defense and Transport Canada. Smith was hoping to draw valuable scientific information from these reports. His study was known as Project Magnet.
In 1950 and 51 and in 1952, Canadian scientist and government official Wilbert Smith with the Department of Transportation had a very, very strong interest in UFOs. And I think what appears to be on his own initiative did a tremendous amount of research on this topic. Spoke to many American officials, including a defense scientist named Robert Sarbacher, who told him that UFOs in America were considered the highest matter of security. Wilbert Smith also became very close with Donald Kehoe, who organized NICAP several years later. Wilbert Smith was able to get approval for something known as Project Magnet, which occurred in Canada. And this was a study that would attempt to measure the appearance of UFOs by setting up instrumentation that would detect them through electromagnetic means. It is believed, in fact, the project did record a success shortly before it was closed down in the early 1950s. it has been said that the project was going to be closed down anyway due to either lack of interest or an unwillingness on the part of the Canadian government to support the project. Following Project Magnet is very similar in a sense to the closing of Project Blue Book in the United States, which was basically a policy of debunking and shutting off of good UFO information.